Hey guys, Blind Spiral here with our rule voting rundown. So this is going to be a longer video. I don't know how long we're going to be here, but want to clarify there will be chapter bookmarks here for you in YouTube. So I'm going to go line by line on our rule book. Any rule change that was suggested at all during the season, whether it was by you or by somebody else or something I just kind of found that I thought was interesting, and go piece by piece and explain each of them to you, kind of throw some pros and cons into them, and we're going to actually look line by line at the voting form that all of you will have once this video is up on YouTube with the chapters and stuff like that. So probably today. It is going to be there's going to be a lot going on here, so feel free to not watch this whole thing. I can't imagine any of you want to sit here and watch. I'm estimating it's going to be an hour and a half. I can't imagine any of you want to sit here and watch that whole thing. So again, there should be chapter bookmarks that'll tell you where to go for each individual rule. So if you've got questions or curiosities about them, step one, watch this, go to that part in the video to see where it's at, to kind of get some more input. Part two, in the, I don't know what pages, I don't know what channel it's going to be, and I guess I should have prepared that a little bit more. There's going to be in one of the channels in our league, probably the links page or the announcements page, maybe with the announcement that we're voting. There will be a text document with all this as well. So if you would rather read it than hear it, it's there as well. And again, option 3 is message me. I know Codes knows a lot about what's going on here, but this was all put together by me, so I'm probably the one you want to reach out to. Or even just ask for other people's opinions in the league chat. If you've got someone that you're friends with that's in the league, or that you've built a relationship with, you can ask them kind of what their opinions are on it, or just ask in the general chat, hey, do we like this? Why should I like this? Why should I not like this? But I will try to go over pros and cons with you guys as we go. So let's just go ahead and kick it off. There are 2 different categories. Actually, there's really 4, but there's 3 I don't know. There's 4 different sections here, okay? So the first one is major changes. So these are major changes to what we've agreed upon as the rule book, and require a majority vote of 8 out of 11. So super majority. I am not voting in any of these. So there are major changes which require 8 out of 11 votes to go through. A lot of these go into effect in 2024 season, so we would skip a whole year and allow teams to adjust their strategy to it. But there are some for 2023. We've got a second section, and that second section is a minor changes. So 6 out of the 11 votes would need to go through in order for this to pass. So a super majority for the major changes, which are 8 out of 11, and then the minor changes are 6 out of 11. And then the last 2 parts we've got for you really are just, this is my text document rundown. Excuse me, sorry, there are rules I've just changed. And so this is how it's going to be now for things that make sense. A great example of this is the holdout. It makes a lot of sense. Geno Smith and Josh Allen and BJ Manning, the same contract, right? We're changing that up a bit. During the offseason, we're just extending rosters to 40 and taking out IR and taxi as people try to figure out their rosters. But things that are like that are just happening, that are rule changes. And then another last section, which is really just clarity for the rule book. I'm not going to go through and read these rule book clarity rules. I will quickly talk about some of these other rules that I have control over, though. But again, the real chunky stuff is really the minor changes and the major changes. So that's where we're going to go ahead and start together. So first rule proposed, I should say, I guess. You'll also notice as a side note, each one of these will have a section down here that says if it requires a second round of voting and when this change would go into effect. So the reason a rule would require a second round of voting is if it changes the points. So for example, this first one is, let's do another one. Oh boy. Okay, let's just start with the first one. And I'll kind of explain what it means as we go, and you'll understand what I'm saying. So first rule proposed to change was, should we add more points per categories? And then which ones would you be interested in adding to the league? So if there's multiple ones you're interested, this is a multiple choice. You can check multiple boxes here. So points per categories are, we all are familiar with points per reception, right? PPR, that's what a league is. Each reception is worth 1 point. There are a lot of other points per category. So there are points per rushing attempt, points per first down, points per rushing first down, points per receiving first down, and points per passing first down. So those are the 4 different categories there. If any of these sound interesting that you'd be interested in adding, check the box. 8 out of 11 votes go through. We'll go and require a second round of voting to determine how much those points are worth. That's what that means there. So they could be worth only half a point each or a quarter of a point each. We can really make it as customizable as we want to, but that's kind of what that section means there. And this would go into effect in 2024 if we went ahead and went through with it. So again, pros and cons to each. First downs are super important in the NFL. You've got to move the chains to score points, and that's valued in the NFL. Is how many times you watch the game and they're like, oh, their third down conversion rate's this, their fourth down conversion rate is this. That should impact your team too, right? So if that's so important in the NFL, as we know that it is, why would this not be important in fantasy football? Getting an extra boost to be that reliable wide receiver that your guy always goes to on third down, or that running back that can run it up the gut on 3rd and 1 to get those first downs could be added benefit to your fantasy team. In addition, points per rushing attempt. We have seen the workhorse running backs kind of go away. 7-8 years ago, it was all running backs all day. Now we see so many committees in the NFL, so points per rushing attempt kind of adds value back to the running backs, because there are strategies in fantasy football where you have 0 running backs or 1 running back or 2 running backs, and you just kind of skirt by since the shelf life of them can be so short. This would add some power back into their pockets. The negative aspect of adding these rules on potentially, it's really hard to track it. So kickers and defenses don't exist in our league because A, they're terrible. B, because Spider Pig's one of them, and C, because they're just so random, right? And so when you take out that variance, it makes your team a lot more consistent in what it's doing. And so adding points per rushing attempt, points per rushing first down, like those have a lot of variance in them, and it's a big change. And so then how do you even adjust to that? There's a lot of questions that kind of come with it, and that's the two sides of that coin there. So if I didn't mention this already, I'm planning to present both sides of the argument as unbiasedly as possible. There are a lot of rules in here, and a lot of them I feel really strongly one way or another way about, but I'm not voting in them. But I'm going to try to do my best to present a really unbiased opinion here. So if you guys feel like I'm being super biased one way or another, please call me out for it, and feel free to present your own argument again in one of the chats there. Moving on to our second rule change. Should players score points for kick return yards or kick return touchdowns? This would require a second round of voting to determine points, and this would go into effect pretty much immediately in 2023. So different voting options here: return yards and touchdowns only, touchdowns and return yards only. Do we allow this in there? So reasons why we should. It's part of the NFL, right? Teams got to play all three phases: offense, defense, and special teams. And special teams gets no love whatsoever in fantasy football. Again, especially with their movements of kicking. So it adds an extra level. Now you have another layer of depth to it, right? So your last flex spot, we've got 10 players we've got to start each week. That's a lot. Your last flex spot might not be the best. We've all had to play a guy, especially during a bye week, who's projected 6-7 points. Do you go with that backup running back now? Do you go with that backup number 3 wide receiver? Or do you go with a kick returner for a team that's got a good special teams? It kind of adds another layer to it. But the negatives is that we've got to make sure we tune it the right way. And if we get the point scoring wrong, we can't change that in the middle of the season. So kick returners could be, very overused or very underused. But also, to imagine losing a game because somebody else's kick returner or punt returner scored a touchdown. That would just feel really bad, I think. And so there's definitely some give and take with that. Not only that, but again, this could be part of the thing itself. If you've got a star wide receiver who also returns, or a star running back or wide receiver who also returns kicks, that really all of a sudden could make those couple players go from already here to here, and there's no way to stop that from happening, or really getting that into somebody else's pocket. So that's the second rule suggestion there. Maybe this won't take an hour. Well, we're already 10 minutes. We'll see how we go. Next one, should teams get home field advantage when they're playing a game at home? So each team would get an equal amount of home games each year, and then the higher seed, obviously in the playoffs, would have their team at home. This would require a second round of rule change, a second round of voting to determine what that looks like. So for me, in my head, home field advantage would look something like, okay, you're playing at home. If you've won a certain amount of games in a row, get points based off of that. So maybe if you're playing at home and you are not on a win streak at all, you get no points, or you get 1 point added because it's a home game, right? And then If your team is won a game, then you're at 2 points. If you're on a 1-game win streak, if you're on a 2-game win streak, maybe you get 3 points, and 3-game win streak would get you 4 points, or a 4-game win streak would get you 5 points. Or we can kind of stop that or cap that wherever we want to, or say, hey, if you're at home, you just get an extra 3-point bump. I just think home field advantage could be a cool thing to add to the league, and different, and that could have implications for it as well. And I like the idea of you've got to be a good team to have home field advantage, because the Texans right now don't have home field advantage, whereas the Chiefs would, the Eagles would, the Cowboys would. These teams that are performing well would have home field advantage. So I think that could be a good addition to add. The problem, again, same thing that we almost talked about with the kick returners. Imagine if your team loses by 2 points, and they got a 3-point bump for home field advantage. You set the right lineup, you set the winning lineup, but because they've got some streak in their pocket, they get a win over you. That's really could be a bit ridiculous, and I think that could suck to be on the receiving end of. But it's an interesting change, and we would really figure out the specifics of what home field advantage would look like, and a lot to determine there. Next one, should the salary cap increase by more than $50 each season it's already allotted? So the rules state currently that $50 would... I got this in the wrong order on my book. It's projected to increase by $50 a year, and the reason is because we'll slowly need to ramp up as our contracts are going to slowly ramp up, right? But the problem with this is that if we go ahead, the benefit to this, let's start with the benefits first, excuse me. If we go ahead and do this, it's great. $50 in every team's pocket, or a little more. Let's say we add another 25, 30, 40, 50. We add more money into your team's pocket. That's great, because now you've got more money in your pocket. Every team gets $50. Every team benefits. And it's already adding cap relief, when I've got a really strong feeling that this year, 2023, is going to be tight on cap. In 2024, there are going to be multiple teams that really, really feel it. And while I think it's going to be great and a great aspect to our league, where you're going to have to take these down years to rebuild and fix your cap, I don't want more than half of our teams in 2024 saying, I don't even know if I can field a roster at this point. And I've got a bad feeling we're trending that way. So this would provide immediate relief to that and prevent that from happening before it happens too soon. Downside to this, there are teams that have clearly taken the tank route this year. There are 4 teams, and hey, I am one of them. So I'm fairly biased, I think, here, and I want to acknowledge that. But there are multiple teams who have said, no, I don't want this player, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that, with the intention of keeping their cap room in a good place, or a better place, or a higher place, with the intention of going into more years, these future years, and using that to their advantage. If you add $50 to every team, and you've got a team like the Webster Tigers, who I can't remember exactly how much they've got next year, but it is a ridiculous amount. I'm trying to pull it up now here as we talk. Adding $50 to them, or to a team like Win Like Flynn, doesn't help them. So they're at $354 next year. That does nothing for them. You look at Win Like Flynn, has $332 next year. You look at the implications, it's $269 next year. Diamond Dogs is $332, $330 for Watson's 25th masseuse. You add $50 onto them, that's nothing. Whereas if you add $50 onto a team like Brownout, which is $110 in cap room, or Justin's Deli, which has $162 in cap room, or Ravagi, which is $126 in cap room, that is huge relief for them. And I'm not trying to target anybody and say they shouldn't get the relief or the help, but teams have made decisions that they've made with these rules in place. So you make your bed, you lay in it. We add $50 to everybody. That's rough. But I also don't think at the same time we do a percentage. I thought of maybe adding a second rule. Well, should we do a percentage increase where if you've got this much money in your room, you go up by, but that isn't fair either, because these teams didn't play last year and sign players with an idea that their cap would increase by more than it is. So that isn't right either. So we're sticking with, should we increase by more, and should we increase more than $50 that you're already allotted to get? And then we'll vote on what that looks like as well, to see, and that would go into effect this coming season. Oh, I did it in the wrong order. Wow, look at that. So I skipped this one, so we're going to go back to this one. Should a percentage of salary cap roll over to the next year? This would have a cap on it. This would go into effect preemptively in 2024, because it wouldn't be right for teams that have saved money this year to get a bonus that didn't exist, and it would hurt teams that didn't plan that way, right? This would require a second round of voting to determine what that cap would be in a percentage amount. So let's pretend. Let's use Make Fullbacks Great Again as a good example here. They dropped $250 on Brock Purdy, make sure that they got the quarterback, and it ended up going well for them, right? You saw a lot of other teams doing that. The Implications did it with T.Y. Hilton. The Diamond Dogs did it to get another one of their players. You saw teams just going ahead and throwing money at a player to lock that player up and make sure that they get them on their team. And it was a ridiculous amount of money that was purely to make sure that they got the player. B. Flynn dropped $50 on Matt Ryan, another example. So the question is, should some of your salary cap roll over into the next year? Imagine 50% of your salary cap rolls over in the next year, capped at $100. If you are not doing well this year, you can kind of save that money, leave it in the bank, and then you get some interest on it. So if you have $100 in free cap room this year, and let's just say we make it 50% of that rolls over. So $50 goes into your cap room for next year as money in the bank and increase over other teams. That'd be really nice to have. If you're pushing for a championship win, you still spend your money liberally trying to get the right players. But if you're not, then maybe you kind of hold off and try to get that money in the pocket for next year. It would fall off year after year. So it wouldn't continue to stack and rise. It would say, okay, you get $50 for this year, but that does expire next year unless you're in the same situation. So does that make sense? Does it not make sense? A con to this, pretty simple. You know, if a team's pushing all the chips in to win this year, and they have, looking at the, reading my notes, sorry. If a team is a contender and they're pushing all the chips in to win and they don't save any money and they're pushing, they're sending picks, they're sending money, they're buying more things, buying pieces, and now all of a sudden they go on the next year's free agency and they're down $250 on another team. That sucks and that feels bad, and being on the receiving end of that would be miserable. So, you know, where do we cap that at? Should we even kind of have this conversation? We can cap it somewhere fair, but you know, do we even really need to go down this way? And then just a couple fun rules here. These last three are a little bit more on the fun, happy side. So first one being, do we have, a side pot for a guillotine? So for those of you that don't know what a guillotine league is, it's all the teams in the league play against everybody, and the lowest scoring team gets cut immediately. They're just out of the league completely. Then the 15 that are remaining play, then the bottom place team gets cut. Then the 14 play, and the bottom place team gets cut. So over and over and over again. You can come in second to last place every single week, and you'll still be in it to the last week. So the idea would be, do we add a side guillotine pot to our league? It would give each team something to play for, even when they're losing and not doing well. Let's pretend that we're in week 9 and your team's officially tanking, but you're still in the guillotine pot because you haven't scored lower than anybody else. It kind of gives you more incentive to keep going and playing. It's also another way to get more money, which could be really fun. I think it's simple. It doesn't interfere with the fantasy football league at all. It kind of sits there on the side. That being said, big deal. You won the guillotine pot. I won the championship. Screw you, right? Like, our focus should be on winning the chip. It shouldn't be on rebuilding. It shouldn't be on a guillotine league. It shouldn't be winning the regular season most points for, having the most draft picks. Your focus in this league should purely be on winning it all. So why would we add another pot and you're taking away money from somewhere else? So let's just leave it how it is and let's focus on winning the league itself, would be the reason why you'd vote no for that one. Continuing on, could we increase the dues for future seasons? So right now we're obviously at $50 a year, which is great. Should we start to creep that up a little bit? Should we go to $60, maybe $75? Should we go to, I think that we can go, I don't want anybody to be to the point where they're thinking about having to leave the league because they don't want to spend the money on it. But I think it'd be more fun if we have a great group, if we continue that and we stick together and we continue on. Do we end up doing $100 where that winning pot really is impactful and really cool? Or do we stay where we're at with 50? Do we increase it just a tiny bit to 60? If we do we add more bonuses in? Do we add, the ideas are limitless when we have more money, but to me, adding bonuses onto like each winning division champion, like each winner of the division should get something, in my opinion. But I don't want to take that away from the main pot. And also, too, let's say you win your division, you get $20. You're going to be like, cool, big whoop-de-fucking-do. But if we did $100 each, we buy into the league, maybe each division winner gets $50, which is their buy-in. So you win your division, you basically get half of a free year or something like that, right? So I think it adds something into it, but I also want to make sure that we keep our group as intact as we can. And the last fun rule that we've got is a jersey shirt rule. So I'm completely stealing this from Alan McNatt, who was talking to us about when he was wearing his Justin Fields jersey. On the trade deadline stream, I asked him about why he was wearing it and if he was a Bears fan, and he kind of explained that they had a fantasy football rule where in each year you're required to purchase a jersey of a player that is on your team, and you have to keep that jersey. If you end up cutting that player or trading that player and they end up on a different team, you then have to send that jersey that you bought to that new owner of that player. I think that's a lot of fun. I think it adds something in that's special and distinct, even though we're totally stealing it. I think it adds another fun wrinkle to it. Is, do you really want to trade that guy that you just bought a shirt for, or a jersey for? And I said shirt instead of jersey. This way, you know, jerseys are $75 if you're getting a good one, $100 if you're getting a good one. I feel like that would, you know, maybe not be fun. But if you go have to get one of those T-shirts, it looks like it's designed like a jersey. That's at least something. But I think that's really kind of cool. You're trying to trade for somebody else's player so you can get that shirt or that jersey and you like them. Not wanting to trade your guy away, not wanting to cut your guy or let him go on free agency because you don't want to have to send that jersey. The cons to this are now we're spending more money again. You know, we don't want to presume anybody's financial situation, and this is fun. And now you have something else you're adding into it as a chore, and so there's that. The other side of it as well is now we're putting our addresses out there a bit. I'm happy to be the hub where you can mail something to me and then I will send it to somewhere else. This way I'm the only person that has people's contact information or addresses. But at the exact same time, I know that we don't know each other like that. I'm still a stranger on the internet to all of you except for code. So there's that side of things. How do we get it there safely? How do we protect everybody's privacy and all that good stuff? And I can assure you that that wouldn't be an issue with me, where I'd keep everything to myself, and I could be like the hub of sorts. But there's still that other side of things that is interesting. And then also, how do we handle this? If let's just say that, you know, this is says 8 out of 11 need to pass this and it goes into effect. What if somebody really doesn't want to do it? Do we put them in a position where we're saying, well, you can't be in the league if you don't want to do this thing? It could get awkward, but I think that's a really, really cool wrinkle that could be a lot of fun. That is it for the major rule changes. So again, all these needing 8 out of 11. The last section here is, are there any rule changes you believe should go into effect further or pushed out or made sooner? So if you see something that should go into effect in 2023 and you're like, that needs to be 2024, that needs to be 2025, it's a big change. Or if you see something that's in 2024 and you're like, we should just do this now, this is a spot for you to leave that comment, and then also letting me know which team you're part of. This way I know that you've gone ahead and voted and done this as well. So that's it. These last two questions are on the minor changes as well. So that's everything for the major changes. Let's go ahead and take a look at the minor changes here after I take a sip. Can't do this sober. All right. Minor changes. So again, all those first ones we just talked about, these are 8 out of 11 need to vote yes in order for these to go through. And again, I'm number 12 who not voting on any of these this season, or other seasons for that matter. The only way I would ever vote on something is if we were in a tiebreaker. This is your league. I want to make sure you guys are having these, but not what I want. So I'm happy to come along for the ride and be here with you. So, all right, the minor changes. So all these proposed changes need 6 out of 11 for the league to adopt them. Certain rules, again, will be voted on a second time. A lot of these are in 2023. There's a couple in 2024, though, as well. First one, a matchup versus the median. So what does a matchup versus the median mean? For those of you that haven't talked about mean, median, and mode since 5th grade math class, the median is the middle. So what do I mean by that? Let's pretend that, so we've got 12 teams in our league. Let's pretend that the scores go, we'll do this by this. Oh, sorry about that. Let's say the lowest score is 90, 95, 97, 100, 102, 105, so blah, 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 blah. The two middle scores, whatever those two middle ones are, let's just say it's 100 and 110 to make it easy. You add them together, divide it by 2, and you have 105. If your team scored more than 105 points, you get another win added to your win column. If your team scored less than 105 points, you get a loss added to your loss column. So you're playing 2 games a week, one against your opponent, one against the league median. Why is this so important, and why is this becoming a more popular rule change? Well, because sometimes you have weeks where you put 170 points up, 160 points up, 180 points up, and the guy you're playing against put 220, and that sucks to be on the receiving end of. We've all been there. We've all dropped a huge week, and if we played anybody else in the league, we would have won, but the guy we played against, we lost. So that's the benefit of that, is you're adding this extra game, and so you have that chance to kind of still win a game, even if you lost because the other team had a major week. I think it's an interesting change. But what is the negative side of that? Doesn't happen in the NFL, man. It doesn't matter if you put up 50 points in a game. If they put up 51, you lost. Point blank, period. Why should it be in fantasy football as well? Pretty simple counter argument for that one there. But a strong argument, and a strong counter argument, so it's an interesting one. Next rule change for poaching. We really didn't have a lot of poaching, and I think that will change hopefully this year with new teams and new players and draft picks, and we'll be scouting and all that good stuff. But one of the things that was really overpowered, I think, was that teams, when they attempted to poach someone else's player, that team would just say, nah, I'm going to re-sign him for a longer deal now, thanks. This rule change would allow you to, if you do successfully poach somebody from another team, you can add a year onto their deal, and you can keep them for longer than just the season that you're currently in. And it would follow the normal rules with all that. The negative aspect of that, if we remove these contract extensions, a team that has players on their practice squad has little incentive to keep them there. That's saying if we remove the there was questions around whether we would remove contract extension for people if they were poached. But the negative of this is we could put people in more contract debt, potentially from the poaching, and all that good stuff. But I think this is a change that we should make. Like I said, I'm going to try to not be biased, but here we are. Next one. Instead of one slot for your team being purely for tight ends, should we change this slot to be a wide receiver tight end? So notice it's not a flex spot where you'd be able to put a running back in there as well, but should you make it wide receiver and tight end? Caveat to this rule, we're going to affect in 2024, so we'd have a whole season prepared for it. Part 2, if we do this rule, tight end premiums would need to exist, which is our next topic to vote on. We're going to kind of combine these together. A tight end premium, so should there be a tight end premium? What that means, for those of you that don't know, is we have points per reception, where every time you catch the ball, you get a point, no matter if you're running back, receiver, tight end. Tight end premium would give an extra point value if you catch the ball and you're a tight end. This would add value to tight ends because they are an underutilized position. So should we add an extra point per reception for a tight end to receive it, or a half a point, or 0.75 points, or whatever the case may be? So yes or no there, and then that goes back to then, would we change that slot to wide receiver tight end? In theory, that'd be your wide receiver 4 slot. So do you have more trust in your 4th wide receiver on your team, or do you have more trust in the tight end on your team that has that tight end premium boost? If they catch 4 passes and we add a whole point extra for a tight end premium catch, that's huge. That's 8 points right there with no yardage added. For a receiver, that's only 4 points. So it really increases the value of tight ends, which are a non-valued position. But also, too, it could change your team strategy to say, cool, I don't need tight end at all, but I'm going to stock up on wide receivers. And we could see a team that now is running 4 strong wide receivers. That could be a wide receiver 1 or 2 on any team becomes a wide receiver 4 for a team, but they have to spend a lot to get that because we've increased the value of wide receivers at the same time. So some up and down there. And the argument against really changing that to tight end to be a wide receiver 2 is it just possibly could increase the value of wide receivers even more. I know we said we wouldn't do it without a tight end premium, but does this diminish the value of premium or like middling tight ends? Does this just make wide receivers really strong and now teams just really focus on getting wide receivers instead? But when it comes to the tight end premium, again, that gives a boost to all tight ends who desperately need it. I mean, you look at how the tight ends in the middle of the pack did. There's not very many points scored when you compare it to other positions. But adding a tight end premium could be great to kind of give them that boost. But then this also does mean more points for Travis Kelce, who dominated the position. Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson, who were clear far and away the number 2 and 3 tight end. So there's that negative side of it as well. If we're adding just more points to those players, then maybe this isn't something we want to do. Playoff tie. So there's such a rare chance of this happening, but I think it's worth discussing just on the off chance it does happen. Hopefully it never does, because that would suck. But if it ever happens and we have a team go up against another team and they tie in the playoffs, and we're talking 2 decimal places and everything, how do we determine the winner? Does the higher seed in the matchup win? Does the higher points for in the regular season win? Or do we take into account what their bench has scored and make that the tiebreaker, this bench versus that bench? No right or wrong answer. I don't really have arguments for or against either of them. I would think it'd be higher seed wins because you've got a higher position there. But also, if I score more points than you in the regular season, there's that. I didn't even think to add head-to-head record. I'm going to update this. Should head-to-head record in the regular season be a factor here, or just highest points for on the bench at the exact same time? It's kind of a weird one, and there's no real good answer to it, but it's one we've got to talk about because if it happens, we should have something in place for it. Continuing on, standings tiebreakers. They're currently determined by head-to-head matchup. Should this change to regular season points for? So if two teams end the season at 10-4, who should be the higher seed? Two chains of thought here. I scored more points than you in the regular season. I beat you in scoring more points. I have 150 more points scored than you did throughout the entire regular season. Therefore, I'm the better team. Therefore, I should have the higher seed. Other side of that is I beat you when we played each other in the regular season. I played against you once, and I beat you. I should have the higher seed than you. So, right now, currently, it is a head-to-head matchup, but should this be points for in the regular season instead as a tiebreaker, or should we keep it as the head-to-head matchup? Continuing on, let's talk about IR. Injuries are pretty rough, and we know that they suck. So should we kind of change up how we manage our injuries? So currently, IR is 3 spots. If a player is out, has COVID, or is on IR, they are eligible to be put in that spot, which allows you to add another player to your team. I'm doing this because I keep playing with my hair. So should you... I don't think it did anything. So should we have more IR spots? Part 1. Part 2, should there be a limit to the amount of IR spots? How big should we expand it? If we expand it a whole bunch, should we make it where it's only players that are on NFL IR that are on the spot? They're eligible to come back now. IR used to be, once you were on IR, that was it. But now you can go on IR for 4 weeks and come back. So should we change it to that? We just expand it, period, and keep it where if someone's just out for the week or has COVID, they can still be on it? Or should we just keep it the same way that it is? We've got 30 people on our rosters as is. We really want to expand to 33, 34, 35 if a team's got a bunch of players that are hurt. And then also, too, what would stop a team if we said, okay, well, if they're on IR, you can have as many as you want. What would stop a team from just adding 18 IR players and having a roster of 18 people that are all just on IR, planning on holding on to them next year? It just would add really an unfair advantage there, potentially. Moving on to the next one, highest seed in the playoffs. Should they be able to pick their opponent? So we look back at this playoff bracket, and obviously the winning team came out of that side with Make Fullbacks Great Again. But I think it was very obvious if you looked at that bracket initially. Brownout versus Diamond Dogs were 2 stronger teams, I think you could argue, than Make Fullbacks Great Again. I think they won the whole thing. Make Fullbacks Great Again and Dan Flashes. So should the higher seed there, should the Diamond Dogs have been able to pick their opponent? I can almost bet $1 million they would not have picked Brownout to play in the first round. They would have picked probably Dan Flashes and Make Fullbacks Great Again, and the playoffs could have changed from that. In the second round, Raggy, they played against Make Fullbacks Great Again. Would they have picked them, or would they have picked a different team instead? This kind of adds a fun caveat to I'm a higher seed, so I get to choose who I play. Currently, it is reseeding, so they play the lower seed, but the 6th seed is the highest points for out of the remaining teams left. Maybe that's a team that you don't want to play against, and it kind of gives you more choice. Obviously, downside of that is that's not how it works in the NFL. You play the lowest seed, and that's that. So, and ultimately, you've got to beat them all to win the whole thing, right? So what's the big deal if I can or can't pick in the very beginning? I still need to be the best of the 6 teams that make the playoffs to get the win. So this doesn't do anything for you. Moving on. We currently determine holds-outs at the end of the week 17. So after week 17, we look at the top players for their position and say, okay, this player is one of the top players and has a lower contract based on percentages, and say, okay, this player holds out. There are multiple teams who have stopped trying after week 15, 16, it seems like. The question is, should we start to track the holdouts or stop tracking the holdouts at the end of week 14 instead of the end of week 17? There are, like, the Colts with their quarterback situation, the Raiders with their quarterback situation have said they're not doing anything. Let's pretend in the magical world that we live in that the Eagles locked up the number 1 seed. Would they have played any of their players? Let's pretend Jalen Hurts didn't have the contract that he has currently, and they didn't play him, or he didn't get hurt, and they didn't play him for a few weeks. because we had the number 1 seed. What we go Birds. And why would we not track it at the end of week 14 where we might get a more accurate viewpoint if a team just decides to rest a player or not try anymore in week 15, 16, 17 when certain teams have already been eliminated and they don't really care anymore. Downside of this is it's a regular season thing, so we said it's a hold off for the entire regular season. Week 14 is not the entire regular season for the NFL. It is for our fantasy season, but not for other ones. So, continuing to talk about holdouts. Tight end holdouts. So currently it's a top 5 tight ends will hold out if their contract isn't where they want it to be. But tight end is such a wasteland of a position where you've got haves and have-nots. So the top 5, is that too extreme? To kind of put it simply, what's his name? Evan Ingram is tight end number 5. He's going to hold out and he's going to demand a lot of money for no reason. He's not worth the $30 some dollars he's going to be demanding here. That doesn't make any sense. So should we change this to be the top 2 tight ends hold out, or the top 3 or top 4 have the potential to hold out instead of the top 5, or should we keep it there? We would make a second round of voting to determine how many in the tight end tier would be. We probably will still hold out with quarterbacks at 6, running backs and wide receivers at 12. We'll change to from 5 and 10. We'll change to 6 and 12 next season. But we're going to do tiered things, but I'm getting way too ahead of myself. But should we change how we do it with the tight ends? Yes or no? Continuing on, if a player holds out, you can re-sign them for a higher price, trade them, or cut them. And that's what the rulebook states. If you re-sign them for a higher price, you don't have a choice in what that is. It's that average of that tier salary. If you trade them, you get to just trade them scot-free, and that new team gets them and has to re-sign them. So the idea here would be, if you cut a holdout, should you get a compensatory pick? So should you get a pick added to your team because you have lost somebody at a high talent? The obvious answer here, if someone holds out currently, is that you would re-sign them or you would trade them for pennies on the dollar, because if you don't, they're going to leave your team anyway. So if you had to take a 4th round to get somebody, well, at least I got something for it, right? If we add this compensatory pick to this formula, now, okay, if I get the end of a 2nd round, so I get 2.13 or 2.14, if I just straight up cut this player, it has the potential to add more people in the veteran auction. Teams get rewarded or get some type of help for losing a player of that talent. And so the holdouts don't hurt as badly as they used to. So it'd be a nice change. Problem is, let's pretend you've got 301 or 302 or, a high 3rd round pick. All of a sudden now 3 teams are picking in front of you because they decided not to sign the player or trade the player away. And they maybe snipe the player that you're hoping to take there in the 3rd round. That would just be really unfortunate. So we would also vote on when that pick should come in. Should it come in at the end of the 3rd round, end of the 2nd round? We're not going to do it at the end of the 1st round. That's way too high. But we'll see how this one shakes out, and we'll kind of go from there. Continuing on, if a player is cut for any reason that was a holdout, should a team get a another pick in the next year's rookie draft? So we just talked about that a little bit, but to further elaborate, let's pretend Robbie Anderson, because that's our guy. Let's pretend he was wide receiver 10, didn't hold out, or did hold out, doesn't matter. He's in that tier. If he's cut from the team for any reason in the next season, so let's pretend Robbie Anderson, this isn't pretending, Robbie Anderson, wide receiver 1, 2022. If he's cut in the year 2023 because he was a wide receiver 1 in 2022, the team that cut him will get a pick to help them out in the next year's draft. This would be helpful for teams that are going to run into contract situations where they've got to cut a player that they don't want to cut. It gives them something back. But on the opposite side, you've got to manage your cap. And so, big deal. If you cut a player, you shouldn't get anything for cutting them. That's tough shit. Try to trade him instead. Try to figure out other options. Or maybe you shouldn't have signed him to a deal that was of that length instead. Next one. Teams are only allowed their cap space in auction dollars for the veteran auction. Should each team get an additional $50. So if you look at your team's cap room on the FF cap overview and you see what your cap room is for 2023, that is how many dollars you will have in the veteran auction that we're going to do closer towards the end of summer, probably July-ish. So the question becomes, if you have $100 in your cap room, should you only be allowed to bid $100, or should you be allowed to bid whatever your cap room says plus 50. That plus 50 would give your team the ability to basically overspend and go into debt, which you would need to figure out by the start of the regular season. So it could add an extra layer. If you really want to get your guy in the veteran auction, this now gives you the ability to do it, but now you're going to have some cleaning up and mopping to do after the fact, so you might need to make a trade. I think it adds another layer that can be kind of fun, where you really want your guy, after you get out of the auction, you're $30 in debt. Now you've got to make a trade or cut a player, and you only have a month or two to figure it out, and you've got to figure it out quickly, and teams could leave you. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll take Nick Chubb off your hands, but I'm only giving you a third, and it's like, no, he's worth a first. Well, if you don't figure it out, you're going to have to cut him anyway, so a third it is. That adds another layer to stuff and allows team to get themselves in the negative cap and then have to figure out a way to get back out of the cap. So could that be fun to do? Yes, no. Downside of it is that you don't have the money, so why should you be able to spend it? So that's the other question or concern there. Continuing on yet again. And this is a big one, and this is going to take a lot of discussion because I think this will change. I think it should change, but we're voting on it. Currently, under the current rules of our rule book, if you cut a player and they are on a multi-year contract, you can go ahead and say, okay, I cut them today. Not today, but I cut them at the start of the 2023 season. I cut them the start of the 2023 season, and his entire year one, the year that we're currently in of the contract, is now dead cap. Everything else wiped away clean. Totally fine. Goes away. You don't have to worry about it ever again. That was put in there to really protect teams that get into a tricky situation and just have to fully tank for a year and just drop people off their roster. But that also isn't okay, because let's pretend you've got someone signed to a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal, a deal that you signed them to, and now you've got to cut them. You can just go ahead and eat the $30 in debt this year and say, whatever, I'm fine. I'm free from the $70 of debt from this bust next year, or 2 years from now, 3 years from now. It shouldn't work like that. It doesn't work like that in the NFL. If you cut somebody that is on a multi-year deal, you will feel the effect of that for years to come. Should it be like that, or should it be the system that it is now? We will vote on what that looks like. There's some percentages that I have in mind, and we'll take a look at it if that vote passes. But should there be increased penalties for moving players on larger deals than there are now, or should there not be increased penalties, which could help your team rebuild a little bit more easily? Next one. Rookies taken in the first round are the only rookies that can be signed to a 5-year deal according to our rules. So should rookies taken in the first round of the draft have a 5th-year option, where teams can decide in year 5 if they want to remove them from their team or keep them on their team, which again mimics the NFL. I think it's a good idea that can be fun. If you have a rookie that you're not into, you can go ahead and, or if you're in trouble cap-wise, you can say, I'm not going to pick up the 5th-year option, let them walk at the end of the season. But it's kind of not how it's written right now in the rules. And again, if you draft a player in the first round and you decide you want to sign him to a 5-year deal, he's got to be the guy, and you've got to commit to that. This would really get you a get out of jail free card for the 5th year potentially. So is it worth that existing? Yes or no? Next one. The cost of rookie contracts is just way too high. So when I wrote these rule books, I never done Dynasty before, or never done a contract league. I just stole ideas from everybody else and put a whole bunch of my own thought into it as well. But currently it's like $10 for a 4th round pick. But I think like $20 for a 1st round pick. It's all over the place. And so I really thought about it for the last month or so. And these are the adjusted numbers that I think would make sense of how much a player would cost. So round 1 through 4, or excuse me, round 1, picks 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and 9 through 13 have different values, and it starts at 25, goes to 22, then 20. Then in round 2, higher in round 2 would be 18, middle of round 2, 15, end of round 2 would be 12. If any compensatory picks pass, they'd be $10 each. Anybody in round 3 would be $7. Anybody in round 4 would be $4. It brings the price down a lot. This is not a yes or no question. This is what are your thoughts? So if you're like, hey, this sounds good, I like this, great. If you're like, I hate this, it should be cheaper, say that. If you think that it should be more expensive, say that. We're going to go ahead and read all 11 of them, get a general feel for what it looks like, and then kind of go from there. Next one, should teams be able to trade a player whose contract is currently set to expire in May? This would mean the receiving team of the player would have to re-sign that player or lose them to the veteran auction. So this is the situation that we're in right now, where every single team has a lot of their players on the contract expiring. So should you be able to trade that player? He is a free agent in May. Nobody's re-signed anybody that's going to start in May. But he's going to be a free agent if you don't re-sign him. Should you be able to trade him to somebody else? Part of me thinks his contract's out, right? So in the NFL right now, you can't trade anybody. Trade deadline's done. You can't trade somebody whose deal's expiring right now because their contract's expired. Should we be able to do that? Should you be able to send somebody to another team whose contract is expired? Again, it would make that team that receives them have to re-sign them with one of the 4 that they've got. So you can re-sign them still, but does that make sense to have, or should that player just basically go to the free agent auction and we'll go from there? Next rule, each team can restricted franchise tag a player, make one the franchise player where you sign them for 1 to 5 years, and then they have 2 standard re-signs as well, which are 1 to 3 years. Should we increase the amount of standard re-signs? So should we go from 2 to 4 of the standard re-signs? Should we have 3 standard re-signs where you can hold on to more of your roster? Yes or no? It is not mandatory that you re-sign or use all of your re-signs by any means. You don't have to do that. But should we give your team, or every team really, the option of re-sign more of your players? Yes or no? Idea behind yes is you can hold on to more of your roster. It's your roster. It's a team you picked, drafted, spent money on, traded for, whatever the case may be. You should be able to hold on to more of them. The idea behind no is contract leagues aren't true dynasty leagues in the sense that things should be a little bit more fresh, and we should see teams need to remove players from their team that are good, add fresh meat to the free agent auction, and allow talent to come out. In dynasty, you're kind of stuck, and you've got to get lucky with your picks and your trades, and you've got to take gambles that work out nicely. And rebuilding can take 3 or 4 years. In our contract league, in theory, rebuilding can happen overnight or over a year instead of 4. But if we allow teams to re-sign more players, it could take longer. But again, if you roll the dice and trade it for this player and they worked out for you, you should want to keep them, right? So there's the other side of that. And again, last 2 questions here. Any rule changes you believe should go into the year later or sooner? To make sure that you're comfortable with when these rule changes would go into effect. If you think there's a bigger change, it should take longer or shouldn't start till longer. You can mention that, or if you think something can happen this off season, you can mention that as well instead of being in 2020. And then again, which team do you represent? This way we can make sure that we're getting all the votes. All right, the next section of our rule book, I just wanted to kind of briefly go over this with all of you as well. These are the changes that I'm going to go ahead and just make as the commissioner because I think that they make sense. So here we are. This is the short list. Not as many of them, but here we are. So fair play rules. So basically what a fair play rule is that you're expected to be competing every single week, no matter what. The only time this really falls off is in week 16. Week 16 when you have the potential to, the extra pick bracket doesn't matter anymore. And the 5th place game has already been decided. So you don't really have the incentive to play. And that's fine. But really weeks 1 through 15, you are expected to try to do your best to win and compete. If you are tanking and you are losing, you are still expected to continue to make logical decisions to win your games. You are not going to put in a 3rd string running back for another team instead of Bijan Robinson or something like that. You should be playing to win each game, even if you're not trying to win and you're tanking. You still need to be making these logical decisions. This is already kind of mentioned in our rule book, but this is a reiteration of that and really a bit more of an enforcement on it. Second one, during the offseason, IR and taxi are going to be removed completely, and rosters will be added to have 40 players total. So no IR, no taxi, but you're increased to 40 players total. This allows you to keep all the players you draft in your team, take flyers on profiles you like in the veteran auction, and kind of go from there. And then what will happen is we will slowly cut back down to the 27 that we have before adding on the IR and taxi again. So then we'll be at 30 again at the beginning of the season, at the very beginning of the first kickoff, but with some cut down days here as we go. But it allows you, if you've got a lot of picks, to hold on to all your players. If you want to make a bit of a splash in free agency, you can do that, and then kind of see training camp reports and how things are looking in the preseason and how all that's going too. Another one, inserting a clause about trade protection. I can't imagine a world that we need this with a group of gentlemen that we've got and how great everybody is, but I want to treat it almost like a physical. So when a player gets traded in the NFL, they get to the new team, they've got to pass a physical before the trade is officially official. So let's pretend that we'll just use me and Codes as an example so I don't make fun of anybody else. Let's pretend that I send Codes a trade and I send him Robbie Anderson for Brandon Ayuk, right? And he decides to smash accept because why would you not want Robbie Anderson over Brandon Ayuk? But I sent him that trade. He doesn't see it right away, and Robbie Anderson gets hurt in the game. Or excuse me, Brandon Ayuk gets hurt in the game, and he tears his ACL. He's out for the season, it looks like. He can't hit accept on that trade and get Robbie Anderson and send me the injured players out for the year because they would come to me and not pass a physical. Again, I don't see a world that would happen, but that would just be really a shitty situation where if someone tried to go ahead and pull a fast one to get a piece for their team for free almost, because someone on their team got hurt, they could send away the hurt player to get a player they can plug in to start. That trade would be vetoed and reversed instead. I want to clarify, pick 1.13 can be traded. It says all over in the rulebook you can't trade pick 1.13. So it can be traded. Just want to clarify that. We already talked about this a lot, but there are 2 instances of a fumble recovery for a touchdown where 2 teams did not get points. I was one of them. Kungsu Panas was another one where somebody recovered a fumble in the end zone and did not get credit for that touchdown. That will change. They will get 6 points for that touchdown in the future. Trading of the cap room can only happen for the current year that we are in and for next year. So there was a trade between Webster Tigers and Team Havoc earlier this year, and they said that it was going to go into effect in like 2026 or something like that. That's just not how it's going to work. It's only for the year that we are currently in, so we're kind of getting to 2023, and then 2024 as well. You can't trade anything in 2025 or 2026. In addition, if you do trade cap room for a different year, you need to pay for it the same way that you would if you were trading a first or second round pick very quickly. Holdout decisions, they need to be made by the beginning of the NFL season. They were currently by the Super Bowl, and that's really unfortunate if your player's holding out and you don't even know what team they're going to be on next year. This gives you to the regular season to really go ahead and make the decision. If the decision is not made by the beginning of the regular season, that player will be cut from your team forcefully. I'll just remove them from your roster, and then they go on a waiver wire, and whoever picks them up for the most FAAB will get them. So just avoid that, and I'll keep you in the loop and remind you as we go as well. But this allows you to have more time to make a decision to re-sign them, or more time to explore trade options or avenues there as well. The loser of the toilet bowl is going to be a pick 4.13. This will make it an even default 50 picks for each team with their picks, and the pick at the end of the first round of the extra pick bracket, as well as the compensatory pick here for losing the toilet bowl gets 4.13. That's an even 50 picks, which is a better number than otherwise. So clearly we got outvoted, and by me, by we I mean me. I got outvoted. I was the only one I think in the entire world who thought it'd be fun to save trading into the rookie draft because of what that would do. But that really is 3 or 4 months where we're just sitting around, dicks in our hands, doing nothing. So we're going to change the wording in the rulebook to allow season to be open as soon as we officially decide on what the rules are here through this vote. And the second round of voting to determine the point changes and all that good stuff too. Re-signing players will open on 5/1, and you'll have until 5/7 to complete. Why 5/1? I like to start things in the first of the month. You'll notice December 1st is when the rule changes where the trade deadline was. That's the same way every year. On 6/1 is when the rookie draft is going to start every season. 7/1 is when we're really going to decide when we're doing the veteran draft every season. So it's just, I like starting things in the first of the month. And 5/1 allows you to get through the month-ish, a little more than a month and a half of NFL free agency to see where teams and players go. It also allows us to get through the NFL draft to see if there's any trades there or anything like that. So it then gives you a week to decide on what you want to do. So yeah, and you can also trade. So if you are, you can send a player away if you want to, potentially there as well. And the last thing is restricted free agent signings. So that process is going to start on 5/8. Each restricted free agent process will take place over a 48-hour period, which will end on 5/31. So there's 12 teams in 2 days for each of those. Puts us right at 5/31, which means the next day is when the rookie draft would start, right after the restricted free agent process, to keep us engaged and going all summer. So yeah, clearly like the starting dates and all that stuff on the first. But those are the rules that we're changing, and I'm just changing. If you have a major issue with any of these rule changes, I need to know immediately, please. These things are just going to happen. They make sense. I can't imagine a world where we don't like any of these, but if you do see one that you're not a fan of, please let me know. This way we can do a separate vote on that if we need to. In addition, the last section of this is really just quality of life changes in the rulebook. So taking out all the words around the initiation draft, I'm going to try to add a table of contents, explain how the toilet bowl seating in the round robin is determined, clarify when rosters were locked before the end of the season, a more detailed explanation about what the RFA process looks like, when do rosters lock for adding free agents, how the rookie draft is going to work, and when each pick is going to happen. Clarify the calculations will follow decimal rules. So just quality of life changes in the rule book that aren't real rule changes, but they're just, hey, we've talked about this extra fluff. This is now somewhere instead of just in our heads. That makes sense to kind of be put out there. So that does it. I thought this was going to be an hour and a half, but here we are at an hour. So pretty happy with that. This is going to be put on YouTube pretty quickly, and I'm going to do the bookmarks to it as well pretty quickly. But we need to have all of you guys please get your votes in by 1:15. Reason 1:15. It's halfway through the month. We can then really start to determine, get all the votes back as quickly as we can. Really start to determine what we need to do a second round of voting on, and what those increases or decreases or changes look like. Vote on those again, and then I've got a feeling there could be a weird third round of voting potentially, or a third kind of question. Let's pretend that so tight end premium, for example. Let's pretend that we vote to pass tight end premium, and tight end premium passes, and then we vote again on how much it should increase by. And so let's say that'll be a majority of that wins, right? Let's say that 1 point wins, 1 point overall wins that vote. Now we would have another round of vote of saying, okay, the tight end premium is going to be 1 point. Are we good with that still? And there could be people who are saying, yes, I wanted tight end premium, but I only wanted it to be a half a point. I think 1 point's too much. I actually changed my vote to no. So there really could be, there's going to be two main rounds of voting here. There could be an awkward small third one. We'll see. Once we get through all this, excuse me, I've got the hiccups out of nowhere. Once we get through all of this and all these rounds of voting go through, we'll update the rule book, and then trading's open. Have 2.5 good months of trading before the NFL draft happens. Do our resigns, do our rookie draft, do our veteran draft, and it's just going to get real quick after that. So time should fly by. That's part about Dynasty Fantasy Football, is that it doesn't stop ever, and contract obviously still the same. So the sooner we get this all done, the sooner we can get things rolling. I know I'm excited to sell some pieces and move some pieces. I know there were other people talking about the same thing. I know Chase, who just took over the new team, was already talking about wanting to move some pieces around. Flynn's already hinting he's got a lot of draft picks. Alan McNatt, who we haven't heard from in some time, is really fired up and excited to move some pieces around as well. So really exciting. And would love to, K Miggs is, got to do some fantasy football too. So really looking forward to getting this rolling again and getting the trading going again, because you guys all know I have a problem. So yeah, that's all I got for you. I hope you have a great night. Happy New Year's if we haven't talked to you since then. Should be doing an award show sometime soon. In the spirit of transparency, I really enjoyed the lack of stress from kind of micromanaging a lot of these different pieces with our league. I wouldn't trade it for anything. We kind of really enjoyed the coming down off of it, but maybe we do that last round of voting that I was kind of mentioning. Maybe we do the award voting with that, and then we've got a little award show of our own as well that codes, and I'll be putting on for you guys. So appreciate you watching this. If you watch the whole thing, you're insane. But I appreciate how many crazies we already have. But looking forward to seeing what the votes come back as. And again, if you have any questions about any of these, or you want another perspective, or you want to talk it out more, I'm here for it. Let me know whatever you've got going on. Cheers. Have a good night.